To Kill a Mockingbird Film Analysis by Shelley Easter, Emily Ruth, Margaret Weddy, and Nathan Weand. Picture a small town in Alabama in the middle of the Great Depression. People were poor. Racism and intolerance were rampant. My father, Atticus Finch, was a small-town lawyer during this time. He was not only a great lawyer, but a great leader, taking on one of the most difficult cases in his life. Atticus showed he was a transformational leader by setting an example of courage and dedication, and making self-sacrifices to benefit followers. By taking on a difficult case, that of a black man accused of attacking a white woman, Atticus proved he was dedicated to defending those who needed it, even though he knew it would be challenging and likely cause him much discomfort. He also provided support, encouragement, and coaching to followers. He tried to inspire and empower others, including my brother and me, to become better, more tolerant people. Daddy was an ethical leader, motivated by a strong internal moral compass. He was honest and consistent, and kept true to his long-held values. He was also adaptive. When change came, he faced it head-on. Atticus was by no means a perfect man, but he sure was close to it, and was most certainly a man of his word. If people said one thing about Atticus Finch, it was that he had a great sense of moral integrity. He was honest, he was trustworthy, and more than anything else, he was ethical. He was as conscientious as a preacher, and you could count on him through thick and thin. Not only was Atticus reliable, but he was always as consistent as a rooster at daybreak. Stability and maturity went hand in hand with dear old Atticus. He could keep a level head in the most trying of times. You couldn't rouse or rile him. Atticus was a man with his eye on the prize. He was change-oriented, and monitored and studied his environment, trying his darndest to encourage those around him to view it in a different way for the better. This was challenging for Atticus, but it was never enough to discourage him. Some might call it a blessing, and others might call it a curse, but Atticus believed that he could change the world. He had a strong internal locus of control, and didn't believe that anybody, not a single uncontrollable force, could step in the way. He believed he could do it all by himself, and made decisions without paying much mind to the people around him. He didn't feel the need for affiliation, and some might say he made decisions like an autocrat, as if he was the only kitten in the litter. He was selfless, though, not selfish, and some may have called him a loner because he didn't ask for help. He did it all himself. When Atticus agreed to defend Tom Robinson, a black man accused of raping and beating a white woman in Alabama, he knew just what he was getting himself into. People don't take kindly to black folks at the time, and they certainly didn't take kindly to anyone defending them either. Atticus was caught between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, he didn't want to compromise his integrity, but on the other he had to face a judicial system deep-rooted in Southern prejudice. Now Atticus had change in mind, but that change was not consistent with the values of the jury he was at the mercy of. These jurors were comfortable in their own shoes, and were not itching to try anyone else's. The jurors, you see, were more concerned with tradition, and were too yellow to do anything they weren't familiar with. Despite the hardships, Atticus faced the music, and stood up for what he believed was right. Now everyone knew that Atticus knew what he was talking about. As only one of a few lawyers in 3 counties, people saw him as an expert. He was the only one I know of that would represent folks with big problems but no purse. It was right that Atticus was after, not riches. Just being smart usually meant folks listened to him, and knowing that the law meant he was usually right. He could charm the pants off folks, and they all thought he was the bee's knees. There wasn't one person in the town he hadn't helped in some way, and if he told you how to fix your problem, you listened to him if you had any smarts at all. I think he gave people more credit than they deserved, though. He thought they would do the right thing, not just because he said so, but also because it was the right thing to do. Atticus thought he could change the way folks were thinking by showing them there was a better way, making them look at it differently, and getting them to see the caring man that felt sorry for the sad and lonely young woman he was trying to help, despite their skin color. What he forgot, though, was that prejudice isn't logical, it's emotional. It's based on the fear that if everyone is the same, there's no one to be better than. That jury resisted and found ways to do what they wanted, or what they thought everyone else wanted. Atticus tried to use the jury's smarts, too, giving them information they needed so they could do the right thing. When Tim couldn't catch that ball because of his messed-up arm, everyone present knew he didn't do a darn thing to Mayella, and those charges didn't amount to a blivet. Using every bit of charm he could muster wasn't enough to inspire them to be rational rather than hateful. Boy, Atticus could talk, though. I guess he learned talking in that fancy law school. His closing argument was the most inspiring and dramatic thing I had ever seen. He told them they were not like the rest of the small-minded people in that courtroom, motioning to the crowd, meaning this is how you can be better than them. He'd already shown them it was what he believed by taking the case, protecting Tom at the jail, and taking care of Tom's family. He walked the walk the way any good man or woman should, hoping to inspire others to follow. Atticus had them believing all right. The fact that the jury took so long to decide, and the newspaper man ended up changing his mind and defending Tom, shows that. Even the sheriff was convinced that Tom was innocent. He said so when they found old Boo Radley killed Ewell to protect Jem and me. Atticus thought a case should be brought up about Ewell's death, but the sheriff said he didn't want another innocent man's life messed up because of people's prejudice. Atticus certainly made them see it, but they changed him too. He agreed to pretend Ewell's death was an accident and let sleeping dogs lie. Tom was dead, and now so was the man who was really responsible for his death. Before this happened to Tom, Atticus would have never agreed to such a thing. He'd have pursued truth despite any consequence. So I can't say who changed the most. At that moment, when Atticus lost his idealism, he didn't look powerful or smart any more, just sad. And when I told him I thought the sheriff was right to hide the truth, that hit Atticus hard too. Not a stitch of idealism was left in me at that young age, at least about the law system. He, in his old age, was now just seeing it. The town went on, but I thought I could see shame in the eyes of the whites when they looked on us, and felt blacks could walk with a little more pride and determination. A white man had fought for them, and the system brought the truth out, even if no one acted on it. Change is change, no matter how slow it might be in coming. It was better than they'd had before. From the outside, you might think that all that mess of a trial meant nothing, and Atticus did nothing at all. But I don't think there'll be another Tom Robinson, or thankfully another man that acts like Ewell. Oh, the Ewell types are out there all right, but they won't speak their mind in the same way, or strut around as if a black man's life just don't matter, despite what lies being told. Atticus's influence had seeped through the town, cascading like a waterfall and soaking both the whites and the blacks. You just won't know it the way the trial actually ended. Just how is it that Atticus was such a transformational leader? Well, listen here and I'll tell you every bit. For one thing, he didn't care much that the man he was defending was a black man, and he didn't pay any mind to the thought that it might damage his reputation among certain individuals in the community. He knew that defending that man was the right thing to do, and he was more than willing to put himself in harm's way in an attempt to fix that court system. He went to visit Tom Robinson's wife, and built a relationship with her and her family despite being threatened by the likes of Bob Ewell and his lynch mob. Wouldn't you know that even on the night before Mr. Robinson's trial, Atticus went to guard that jailhouse himself. He stood up to that angry mob because he knew Mr. Robinson deserved a fair trial. Atticus was also an ethical leader. He always did what he knew was right and wouldn't allow his morals to be compromised. The hardest part was when Atticus went to the home of Mr. Robinson's family to tell them that their loved one had been shot. Mr. Ewell came out of the woods as mad as a mule chewing on bumblebees and spit right in Atticus's face. But my father kept his calm and refused to sink to Mr. Ewell's level. He wouldn't allow his ethical code to be compromised, even for that humiliation. Atticus believed in the justice system, that rational and ethical procedures could shape change in the little community. But old prejudices die hard, so he learned. I often think, perhaps with the same naive conviction of my father, that had I had the opportunity to make the case for Tom Robinson, I would have acted with more adaptive or external behaviors. I would have worked outside the courtroom to sway members of the community. I would have asked for help from other lawyers and extended the position power of the defendant. Most importantly, I would have told those old coots on the jury what a vote for not guilty would do for them. If only there could have been more member diversity on the jury. It wasn't possible at the time, of course, but I can see in my mind's eye Atticus's beautiful speech moving a jury if they hadn't all been white men feeling victimized by the Depression. They needed to feel powerful. Perhaps framing a not guilty vote as an expression of power against a broken system would have swayed somebody on that jury. I still think my father's words struck a chord with a few of those men, but as a group they all worked with the same criteria and measures of their community. The black man was guilty because the black man was always guilty. That's what their fathers told them, so that's what they believed, and that's how they voted. Atticus wanted a rational and lasting change, but the people weren't ready. He was beaten against a stone wall of Southern racism, too heavy to be moved all at once. Poor Mr. Robinson didn't have time to wait for the wall to be taken down a brick at a time. Atticus needed to begin showing people clearly and practically how a truly fair justice system can benefit the community and how they should be involved in making the change. I wish to God Atticus had stayed with Tom after the trial. I don't believe for one hot minute that Tom ran. I wouldn't blame him if he did, though. Job himself would have lost faith as a black man in Macomb. My father had faith that, despite the outcome of the trial, the system would work and provide Tom, an innocent man, with protection. He did not see the consequences of his actions, how that sick drunkard Ewell would try to hurt Jem and me. Had my plan been used to work in the community and get more lawyers from other towns, the trial may have turned out differently, but I fear we might have been even more danger. Some people could ignore Atticus's odd ideas if they were confined to the Macomb courtroom, but not if he tried to change their behaviors or challenge their thinking too much. His reverent power kept us safe because everyone knew him to be fair and generous, but it would only go so far. Change happened slowly, but change did begin that day, in the town and in Atticus. But what the towns gained in tolerance, Atticus lost in idealism. You could see that in the way he protected Boo, that outcomes mattered more than procedures. Macomb's better for it. Can't nobody say different. We all learned a lot from my father that summer.